I'm going to be hosting today's panel with Christian, who you just met. A quick intro about ourselves. Mentra is building the world's largest employment network for neurodivergents across the country to match them with fulfilling careers. To discuss the topic of neurodiversity even further, we have three speakers here today that we're excited to introduce. I'm going to go ahead and pop open a couple of slides. Cool. We have three awesome speakers today. We've got Will Gerard, a user experience engineer, Deja Drummer, a front-end engineer, and Jake Hamlin, a data engineer. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two of us as hosts again. My name is Shay, and we've got Christian here as well. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce Deja. Deja, you're muted.
Wow. Hi, everyone. My name is Deja. I create inclusive tools for an ever-changing community, and I wasn't born neurodivergent. After an accident, I kind of was thrown into it, but I had to adjust to that lifestyle. Even though I have epilepsy, I don't allow it to stop me from becoming a front-end developer and bringing more accessibility into the tech world. With Mentra, I have the confidence to do that because they value my assets and who I am.
Awesome. We're so lucky to have you, Deja. Thanks for joining. Our next panelist is Will Gerard.
Howdy, folks. I'm Will Gerard. I use he, him pronouns. I've been with Mentra for just over a month as a UX engineer. I'm also a mentor for a different coding bootcamp called 100 Devs. My journey getting here was non-traditional. I don't have a CS degree. Nothing against CS degrees, but I come from a bootcamp background. Before the pandemic, I was running my own freelance design business and bartending. You can see the first picture there is me behind the bar, and also I'm a pineapple. When the pandemic hit, I lost both my jobs, and I found a coding bootcamp, and through that and mentorship, helped me pivot into tech. I was also diagnosed with ADHD later in life, about 5 years ago. So yeah, I'm really stoked to be here and talk to folks about neurodiversity and getting into tech through a coding bootcamp.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Will, for your story. And I'm loving the pineapple and cat vibe. I have two cats behind me right now. You can't see them because of the virtual background, but I promise you that your cats are in good company as well.
Pineapples and cats are very important to me.
It's a good vibe addition. And we have our last panelist for today, Jake Hamlin. Jake, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. How you doing?
Doing all right.
Good. So yeah, I'm Jake Hamlin. I'm stoked to be here. I was diagnosed with what they called Asperger's syndrome back when I was 19 in 2004. We call that autism now. I spent the next decade or so sort of trying to make my way in the world, doing a lot of interesting entrepreneurial things. Worked in football for a while, hence my Jerry Rice picture. Took a U-turn into finance a couple of years ago, was working with some small startup hedge fund kind of things, hence the New York Stock Exchange picture. And then about a year and a half ago, I got an email saying that Goldman Sachs wanted to hire autistic business analysts in Dallas, which at first I thought was a joke, but it turns out I've been there about a year and a half now, thanks in large part to support from Mentra, who was part of the hiring process alongside a partner in getting me over there. And so I'm excited to share my story.
We're so excited to have you here. Loving the stock exchange and football vibe. Thank you for your introductions. Now, I'll turn it back over to Christian.
I think we're just going to take the next hour and talk about Jerry Rice, if that's okay. It's my favorite player of all time, so we're just going to take a quick right turn. So I've been lucky enough to speak with the Mentra team a couple times, and one of my favorite things was actually not just hearing about what you do, but where you actually were born, where the idea came from. So can y'all tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm going to pass this one over to Con and Angelica. I believe that they are signed on by now.
Yes, hopefully you can hear us and see us. Fantastic. Absolutely excited to share about Mentra. So our founding story was inspired by my own non-speaking brother, Vikram. And for most of his life, he was unable to speak And then at the age of 27, with the right technology, he learned how to communicate, and it was actually Apple's iPad. It was amazing. It was designed so with such accessible user interface that he was able to type and write words, and what came out was incredible poetry. I mean, there was so much knowledge and talent that had gone untapped for so long. So when Connor and I started out at Georgia Tech, we were doing research with the community and realized that, wow, technology really has the power to equalize the playing field for millions of neurodivergents, especially even for folks who, whether they can't speak, whether they have different socioeconomic backgrounds and aren't able to enter the workforce. So that's really what inspired the founding of Mentra. We realized that the traditional platforms like LinkedIn and Indeed might not always work for the neurodivergent community, and we wanted to build something from the ground up that was cognitively accessible. And so that's what we did, and really excited that we have this event and we have neurodivergents here who've had success in their own fields.
Yeah, and just to expand on that, my name's Connor. I'm the co-founder of Mentra. I actually met Jillica about 4 years ago at Georgia Tech when she was giving a TED Talk about the story of her brother, which is such a profound example of how neurodivergence might not always be recognized for their true strengths in this world. Oftentimes, we can overlook that just because we don't understand. And for me at the time, I was didn't consider myself neurodivergent, but fast forward 3 years later, and through the advice of some close friends and mentors, I actually went and sought out a diagnosis to go through the process of getting tested. And it turns out that I actually do fall on the autism spectrum. Found out at age 24. And, a lot of the experiences of my colleagues here at Mentra and from working with many folks on the spectrum and who are neurodivergent, which takes many forms, I kind of went through that journey, and it's actually helped immensely to kind of understand and contextualize a lot of the life challenges that I have experienced growing up. So I'm very excited to hear more from the panelists, and thank you all for being here today.
Very cool. We're very happy to have you all. One of the coolest things I get to do at Codeup is to talk to really cool people at different companies, specifically Fortune 500 companies with different initiatives, whether they are bringing in more veterans, more highly diverse candidates, those kind of things. So I'm curious to see, since the birth of Mentra, what has been the type of reception that you've gotten from the companies that you've spoken with?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very much a shift that's happening right now in the industry, where sort of in this old world, neurodiversity is something that, at best wasn't talked about very much. And at worst, sometimes was looked down upon for being different and for not fitting in. I think that is changing very rapidly with sort of the advent of remote and flexible work, where we're able to see neurodivergence being able to thrive in the right environment. And also with sort of the overall sort of inclusivity revolution that's going on across companies. And already we are seeing more than 20 companies that are just jumping at the chance to be on board from the ground floor of sort of this movement that's happening. And we're really excited to be showcasing the business value for companies to hire neurodivergents, and for neurodivergent job seekers who are out there who traditionally may not have been able to come forth and share their full selves. That means a lot, because those businesses now, if you do sort of unmask and bring your full self forward, there's a growing community of companies that will actually value you more for it, and really appreciate that level of diversity in their organizations.
Very cool. I'm very excited to see kind of where this is going, but I want to take a step back here. We've heard a word here a couple of times that some people in the audience may not be familiar with. So Shay, can you please give us a quick definition, or what your definition is, of neurodiversity?
Absolutely. Some folks here have heard the term neurodiverse or neurodiversity or neurodivergent for the first time. Others may have heard it once or twice in the past. Neurodiversity refers to the neurological variances in the human brain. And in other words, some folks are born with brains that think, learn, and process information differently than others. This includes things like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, epilepsy, and a range of other neurological conditions. A recent statistic shows that 1 in every 7 humans are neurodivergent, and more than half of them don't even know it. Many people here today might not realize that they fall under the neurodiversity umbrella, as this oftentimes goes undiagnosed due to financial or cultural barriers that are placed on people to get a diagnosis.
Awesome. Yeah, we've already had a few conversations with people. When I gave them the definition, they said, I think that may actually be me. I should go look into this and see how this could, like everybody else was mentioning, help me out versus not hold me back, but use this to kind of to move forward. So we're excited to welcome you and the rest of our guests. So please tell us, what are we going to talk about today? What's the conversation going to be like?
Absolutely. Today, we're excited to open your eyes to the variety of shapes and forms that neurodiversity can take, as well as a couple of common examples of challenges that neurodivergents face, especially in the workplace. We're also going to share how our platform, Mentra, is revolutionizing the hiring process by making it inclusive for neurodivergents to connect with inclusive employers that value these strengths. Our first question for today's panel is going to go to Deja. I mean, it sounds like a simple question, but what does it mean to be neurodivergent, and how has neurodiversity influenced your life?
So to me, being neurodivergent means to be strong and confident. With my initial diagnosis, as I mentioned before, I kind of was thrown into it. So I was angry and a little overwhelmed with the whole ordeal. But now I realize that it forced me to do a lot of positive things with my life, make better choices, like sleeping correctly, eating the right things, exercising, because if not, there's going to be a negative outcome. So it's like a blessing in disguise. And I'm glad that now I am neurodivergent.
You mentioned before, but your story is unique in the sense that you were diagnosed later in life and because of the specific event that happened. How would you say that this background has changed your perspective on neurodiversity?
So I'll admit I was very ignorant to what neurodivergency was at first. When I was first diagnosed, I couldn't talk and I couldn't walk. So I was just like, oh, wow, this is it. I'm limited. I can't do anything. My life is over. But I was just pushed to do more. And as you can see, I'm speaking now, and I know you guys probably can't see my legs, but I can walk. So it just opened my eyes to see that being neurodivergent doesn't mean you really have to be any different than anybody else. Is really what you put is your limitations. And I see it now as just being courageous and adapting to things and being patient with yourself and with others. It gave me a very new perspective on what it is.
I think a lot of folks here can resonate with that, whether or not they are neurodivergent. And I really appreciate you saying that. Our next question for Will, speaking of perseverance, is as someone who's neurodivergent, how did you navigate your career for technology specifically?
Yeah, and thank you, Deja, for sharing all that. That was powerful stuff. My neurodivergence is displayed through ADHD. I'll often get into like a hyper-focused mode, which can be really useful for like getting into like a flow state with work. It can also be incredibly frustrating if I end up focusing on the wrong things, like negative thought loops or procrastinating, gaming, all that sort of stuff. It also makes planning things very difficult, planning ahead. I can get very caught up in what's right in front of me and kind of find it difficult to, like look a little bit further ahead. So that kind of made, I think that made freelancing kind of an interesting career path, allowed me to set my own hours, just like do things the way that I needed them to be. And there was always something new to learn. So that was kind of something that was interesting going down the freelancing path, but it was also very difficult for me to sometimes find a stable income. That's why I bartended as well on the side when things were slow. It was also a good way for me to push me out of my more introverted shell, push my communication skills a lot. And yeah, when I lost my job during the pandemic, I took the opportunity to figure out a more stable career path, and knew that getting into tech, it's a growing field. It's never going to stop growing, and it's a good way to make good money. And I was really interested in how there's always more things to learn. That's something that's really exciting to me, and puzzle solving. And yeah, through that boot camp and reaching out to mentors, people who have gone through the job hunt of getting into tech, really helped me pivot into tech. But some things that really helped along that journey, having all this time on my hands with losing my jobs and the pandemic, also kind of forced me to really take a look at what environments worked best for me, and what routines worked best for me, and just coming up with routines was really big. Setting a really solid sleep schedule, writing daily to-do lists, weekly to-do lists. Like I said, with ADHD in particular, it can be really hard to plan things out. So like writing a to-do list the day before, and then waking up and having it right in front of me, was kind of a game changer. And coming up with a routine that I could stick with. It was really tough at first, especially coming from this like freelancing career and this bartending career where like my schedule was kind of all over the place. Coming up with a routine, I slowly had to implement it, where I just like would do like a morning routine and like slowly build on top of that. Of like if I wanted to do like, meditation 5 days a week, I couldn't jump into meditation 5 days a week right away. I had to, be happy with like maybe 2 days a week, and then add 3 days a week and 4 days a week, and adding then in like study time to that routine. Like the more I built a routine, easier it was to kind of stick to it. Like momentum really helped out a lot. So yeah, those are some of the things that kind of helped me navigate into tech. Having a supportive community, like using that bootcamp community, like reaching out to people in the bootcamp community, talking to the people, kind of about my struggles, being a neurodivergent and just going through a boot camp. Going through a boot camp is difficult, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical. It's a very difficult process, learning how to code. But reaching out to community members, talking to folks about the struggles I had being neurodivergent, was really helpful. And then actually like reaching out to people that use like Twitter, LinkedIn who are already in tech, to kind of figure out the path that they took to get into tech really helped build some ideas for me on how to get into tech, and also built like communication skills too. So that's a bit of a ramble, but yeah, that was kind of some things that I thought of how I navigated into tech.
I love all of that. And I really resonate with building community and having routines, both of which have been very important during the pandemic and then sort of at the outset of the pandemic, to the best of our knowledge. So I appreciate all of that. On the subject of having these routines and having this community, I want to ask Jake about how has an employer accommodated or accepted your differences in the workplace or in interviews, and how have those accommodations resulted in a positive outcome for you?
Sure. So I think the biggest thing, first of all, that's important is that for a lot of us out there, when we talk about the challenges of getting a job, they're not problems related to the job itself. The problems are actually more about recruiting and how you sort of get through a recruiting process. Again, having done all these interesting things that I've done, try fitting them on a resume that makes sense to to like an HR software, for example, right? So what was really helpful to me was, first of all, the company itself deciding to set up a program, looking for us. But it's important to know that that's not just Goldman Sachs, that's everywhere. People are looking for us, and going through the process, just being really upfront. So for example, in my case, my autism doesn't travel alone. I have a pretty significant sleep disorder. So I had to have alternate hours. In a typical job environment, if you don't speak up about that, it's going to look like you're late or lazy or all kinds of terrible things. Simply asking for the help that I needed, suddenly no one cares. I come in when I when I come in, I stay until I can stay and I get my job done. And I think that that piece of just really being upfront in this, this is an environment where the world is really, really open to that kind of communication in a way that it wasn't 10 years ago. So I'm grateful for that and think y'all should take advantage.
I totally appreciate the discussion about just being upfront and honest. And I do think that that's something that more folks can be aware of, that sense of being transparent upfront, because it will help you and because it will build the bridges that you need to be successful in a corporate environment, in a work environment, or in an interview sense. So I appreciate that really helpful insight. Thinking about these unique combinations and these non-traditional backgrounds, Deja, how would you say that your unique and non-traditional background have given you a strength that allows you to take it into the workplace?
Just like Will, I also went through a boot camp. And of course, no one's hating on computer science degrees. It just, you have your preference. And at first I thought that's really all you needed to be successful in tech was a college degree. But I learned with that boot camp that collaborating with others and being able to communicate well as really knowing how to reach out when you're in need of help is great skills that I possess because of that experience. And I feel like if I take that into the workplace, it would be a great strength for me, because a lot of people can learn how to code, but not everybody knows how to have those soft skills. Combining the two is just, it puts you at the top of the list. It just helps you to say, okay, I can collaborate well with that person. I'm kind to that person. I can communicate the needs or work with the team. And I feel like that's a very strong aspect that would help me out.
It's interesting that you mentioned the soft skills, which is something that's become very interesting in light of pandemic and recent history, where a lot of our soft skills are coming through over video chat, and there's a lot less of that in-person interaction. And there's lots of companies that are going all remote now. So there's emphasis on different soft skills that are coming across differently is a really interesting conversation. And thinking about those soft skills a little bit, actually, it's a good transition. This question is for Will. Is there anything that you'd wish you'd done differently in your boot camp that might have better prepared you for your job search as a neurodivergent?
Yeah, that's a great transition, because that is something like you mentioned, soft skills are super important, but these are soft skills which are kind of unique, of like communicating over video calls. That's like a very specific skill set. I appreciate that the bootcamp I went through like really encouraged networking and soft skills and communication skills throughout the bootcamp. But I wish I'd started like really hearing that earlier on and started networking even earlier. Getting into then like the interview stage, the job hunting stage, interviewing over video calls. I was bad at it. I was really bad at it. I remember the first interviews I did. I was not very good at it. And even like the networking over video calls, I was, just kind of felt a little awkward the first few times I did it. But the more I did that, the more I did like coffee chats virtually, the more I did interviewing virtually, the better I got at it. Just like anything new, it takes a while to get good at those things. But I think, I was surprised, being a bartender, like I've really worked on my like communication skills and just like getting to know people quickly, but like that surprised me, like how that didn't obviously translate as quickly as I thought it would to the virtually meeting people. So like just getting really comfortable sitting in front of a camera and getting to know someone else and talking about yourself is a very unique kind of skill set, and it does take time to get good at that. I know we're like starting to get like out of the pandemic world, but I feel like things are still in like a virtual setting for interviews and whatnot. So I definitely encourage folks to like before they even feel ready to like start networking, like start interviewing even, like get those bad interviews out of the way. There's going to be bad interviews. Like anything new, again, just like you're probably not going to be great at it to start, especially interviewing in tech, like interviewing in tech over video calls. That's like so much new on top of new. And it could be really intimidating. People start asking you like really specific questions about like event loops and stuff, and like you're in front of a camera, and you're not in a room. You can't see the person in person. So just, yeah, practicing that, whether it's like with your fellow cohort members or coffee chats, or yeah, actually like, getting some interviews in and getting them out of the way even before you feel ready, maybe. I know it's exhausting interviewing, but yeah, just know it is gonna, unless like, there's some lucky roll of the dice, and you the first interview you get, somehow everything lines up and you get that job, like probably won't happen. It's probably going to take some interviews, multiple interview processes to get that job, and getting those coffee chats in early is really going to help out, just build those virtual communication skills. And the other thing, Deja mentioned, just like collaboration. Like I found a lot of success like learning how to code through creating my own GitHub open source projects, and then going and contributing to open source projects. I feel like that can definitely that can get you a job in itself. Just having a really good GitHub portfolio, like showing that you participate in GitHub, you know how to collaborate across Git and GitHub. That's kind of like universal across the development world, and getting really good at Git and GitHub, and showcasing those skills. I wish I'd done just a little bit earlier. I mean, it's tough to jump right into that, but wish like even before I felt like totally ready for it, like starting to just go in and like break things on Git and GitHub, and finding new projects to collaborate on. Even if it's not through code necessarily, like editing like README docs or something. You don't necessarily have to contribute through code for an open source project, but reaching out to those communities and getting connected with them can really be helpful.
One thing I'll say in terms of managing stress is in a virtual environment, and if you're stressed out in those virtual interviews or video, you can just be like squishing a stress toy or doing something outside of video so nobody knows you're doing it. Like if there's been one benefit to doing video interviews, is that I can be like squishing a stress toy. My brother gave me this little cute dog right here, and I have an eyeball from when I had an eye operation. Christian's got his stress toy. I love it. So squish them all you want if that's helping you relieve stress. It's better than picking my fingernails, I have to say. So I prefer to do that over picking my cuticles.
Yeah, I even would like record myself, do like mock interviews with, I'm like talking to my pet or something, and like record myself, and then go back and like look at those recordings to see like my nervous tics, and kind of just analyze. It's a little weird, but yeah, even that's a nice like maybe intro if you're like so uncomfortable even with like practicing with another person. That's like one thing folks can do to get some practice in.
Yeah, that was always one of the things that I tell our developers: get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You're never going to walk in fully comfortable, but put yourself in front of a mirror and answer a question about object-oriented programming and see what you look like, and get yourself to that point. And then it gets a whole lot easier. But I want to jump in here and ask a question first to Shay, and I want to open it up to the panel as well. We're 30 minutes in. I know for a fact that there are people listening to this where they're scratching their head a little bit, thinking, okay, I may be, this is affecting me, or this is connecting with me a little bit more than I was expecting it to. What advice would you give those in the audience that have a hunch that they are neurodivergent but aren't sure?
So one big thing that I would absolutely say is if you have family members or friends who you know are neurodivergent, talk to them. They would want nothing more than talk to you about it and have an open and honest conversation about it. You'd be shocked at how many family and friends, some of whom are close to me, some of whom are extended, have talked to me about autism or related things since I've become a lot more vocal about it. So if you have folks in your personal or professional life who are neurodivergent, talk to them, because you never know what's going to happen. In terms of a diagnosis, I recognize, and also Mentra recognizes, that there are a lot of barriers to getting a diagnosis. And for some folks, it's a cost issue. For some folks, it's a society or social or other philosophical issue where getting a diagnosis may be untenable or impossible. I will add that Mentra as a platform recognizes folks who are self-diagnosed, because there are challenges associated with that. And we do not require a proof of diagnosis on sign up. Some of our partners and some of our employers might, but we as a platform do not explicitly require a diagnosis. In terms of approaching a job finding process, I would absolutely say the more you know about yourself, and as folks like Will and Jake have alluded to, knowing yourself is really important to that. Knowing if you need accommodations, knowing if you need to practice something, knowing how to manage stress or manage anxiety in those processes is going to be paramount to your success. And whatever accommodations that you need to do to your environment, or to ask your interviewer or potential employer to accommodate for your environment, are only going to help you have an easier time so that you can do your most authentic, best work, rather than feeling as though you are being hampered or impaired by circumstances that may be beyond your control.
So let's toss it over to Jake. What advice would you give somebody who thinks they're neurodivergent but aren't sure?
I think the first challenge really is, so what? Meaning, we're all different in a whole host of ways. And so why do you feel the need to put that label, to find that label? And so some good reasons for that are to help guide yourself in terms of like finding supports that you need, to help better understand yourself, to help identify what kinds of roles you are, you're best suited for. Those are all valid reasons, but it's important as you start the journey to sort of think about what you're trying to get out of it. If you've met one person on the spectrum, as they say, you've met one person on the spectrum. So knowing that you are something doesn't really tell you anything by itself. It's got to be sort of towards a destination for the effort to be worthwhile. I'd also say that as somebody, I have kind of a different perspective on this, because when I was diagnosed, I was working in professional football. It was 2004. It was not a time that you talked about any of this kind of stuff. And so for me, I was the opposite. I was going to beat my diagnosis. I was going to learn how to hide it. I was going to be, all those things. And I'm not going to lie, I did get some benefit out of doing that. Part of the reason I can do these kind of panels and talk the way I do, sound the way I do, is because I taught myself. And you can indeed learn whatever social skills you want to have, but there's this real cost to doing it from this perspective of trying to deny this part of yourself. And what I found over time was that my world, it just kind of shrunk, because I only put myself in places where I knew how to not look autistic. And so knowing that, just seeing how limiting it became a big thing for me to basically to see what would happen if I just ignored that instinct and tried to do it the opposite way. And, literally 3 months after I made that decision, I found myself at Goldman Sachs after a decade of quasi-employment. So I think it's really weird. There's a piece of me that it's really weird to hear you say, oh, I think I might be, how do I seek out a diagnosis? Because, again, I come from this place of people not seeking it out. So I think it's really cool that, anybody who has that instinct to learn more about yourself, I think that's just a really cool thing and says great things about sort of where we're going in this community.
Very cool. Deja, what do you suggest?
I really feel like the guys kind of wrapped it up. I can't put more on it than what they said, but I do agree with Jake. It's like, yeah, that may be what it is, but if you're looking to just kind of manage whatever it may be, whether it's stress or anxiety, then of course, finding the right diagnosis is a great thing. But like Shay said, there may be cultural barriers or a cost to it that some people can't afford. And I would just try to reaching out to people, honestly, is the best way to find resources for a lot of things. I didn't have a doctor that could handle my epilepsy like the right way until I reached out to a community of people who are similar like me. And they're like, well, we go to this hospital with this doctor. And I'm like, wow, okay. And I went and it was just life-changing, you know? So I just say, just try to reach out to people, really feel comfortable in getting to know maybe why you want to, and just seeing how can somebody else help me get to where I want to be.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's so great to hear those that input on what to do if I feel like I'm there. Each one of y'all had a later stage in your life when you were able to be diagnosed. What was that like when you had to go inform those around you that you were neurodivergent? What were those conversations like, and what were you afraid of, and what were you surprised by? I'll start with Will this time.
Yeah, I think just like it was encouraging and surprising to like reach out to folks and start talking about it, and just like the warm reception I had when I did start talking about it and be open about it. I think I do think that's a good quality in folks, that, you know, if you start talking about the things that you've gone through, the hard things that you've gone through, that shows that you've done some introspection. And yeah, I feel like it was encouraging, the responses that I got from the folks that I did talk to about, you know, the journey that I'd gone through on getting the diagnosis. Again, it's only one part of it. Like, so it can be a very important part, but then figuring out like, what do I do with that diagnosis? Or even more important than that, just like, how do I manage things? How do I be the best me that I can, which a diagnosis can help out with. But yeah, I got a warm reception, and I think, yeah, things are shifting. I really appreciate that, of people being more open to talking about mental health, talking about neurodiversity. And I'd like to think folks will be surprised if you just like start talking about that to your friends, your family, whatever. Of course, everyone's got their own journey, everyone's got their own path. But if you find those folks where you feel like you can feel comfortable talking to them about it, I'd like to think that they'd get a decent, warm reception. Yeah.
How about you, Deja?
Initially I received like a lot of like sympathy, like a lot of people were just like, oh, you know, and that was a little irritating, I can say. But then eventually it was like, I had to be the teacher, because a lot of people that I told, they didn't know anything about epilepsy. They didn't know how to handle it if I had a seizure. So some people are very timid, you know, like at first, a lot of my friends were like, well, I don't want you doing this. I don't want you doing that, because I don't want that to happen. So it was like teaching them, and also just learning for myself what I can do. And like, oh, okay, I figured if I don't do this, that won't happen. But overall, like I said, just talking to a community and hearing and seeing other people like do different things, it changed a lot for me. It put me more out there, and it helped my friends and family learn more about me and other people who could be neurodivergent. So it was a great experience.
I think we all have something that we're afraid to share with people, and we think it's going to be the worst. And then they're like, okay, cool. Are we going to go do that thing we were talking about? And then you're like, well, that was a lot easier. I know I've had those moments where I've relayed some information to people and thought this is going to be the end of that. And they're like, all right, that's what you wanted to talk to me about. Let's go find something else to do, or, you know, let's move on. And that's always really good. What about you, Shay? What was that like once you got past that diagnosis, and how did those people around you treat you? And
so I was diagnosed at a really young age. So I've been autistic, and I've known I've been autistic for most of my life. I think for me, it's more of a story of like recognizing it closer to my young adult and adult life, and then using it as a vehicle for something else. In my particular sense, I had every service under the sun. I had an IEP, a physical therapist, speech therapist, occupational therapist. I could go on. I had pretty much everything that I could have needed and wanted in order to learn how to be successful when I was young. and then going through school and going through the workplace, understanding, hey, I struggle with these things. Maybe it's because of me being autistic. That was a really big like brain blast aha moment for me. And I started to be a lot more open about disclosing my diagnosis to my employers when I got my first full-time job. I said it pretty much upfront to my first boss. I'm like, I want you to know something very private about me. I'm autistic. And to me, this means A, B, C, D, E. And he was really awesome with me, and we built a good relationship around helping me get better at the things where I was struggling at, but also not holding me to the flame for things that were either out of my control or I was just struggling with. And I was really fortunate to have had several bosses and managers who were really supportive of me. But I would say the biggest thing there was just that having that epiphany moment and then being honest with myself about what areas do I struggle in, and then how am I going to either do something about them or find an environment where I can thrive with these traits about me that are hard for me to fully control.
Yeah, awesome. Shay, I know you're more in the background with the CTO stuff, but I know you also speak with companies. And if Connor or Gallica want to jump into this one, we would love to get your input too. But what are some of the biggest misconceptions about neurodiverse candidates and employees that have you heard from different companies where you literally just had to change one thought process to another?
Yeah, I can take this one first, and then Connor can jump in after me if he wants to. Really, a big thing that I've known about my neurodiverse peers, or when working on a team where someone was neurodiverse, is really just, I feel like a lot of times we get held of like kid gloves or baby gloves. I think Deja alluded to this a little bit, but like, I feel like we're treated as like an other or different in sometimes. This doesn't apply to everybody, but I will say that I've been in environments where as soon as it's obvious that I'm autistic or neurodivergent in some way, everything kind of changes. And I think a lot of folks on this panel and listening can resonate with that fact that as soon as they mention it, everything kind of changes. And that's why I've been sort of hesitant to really disclose it in the past, whereas now I'm very open about it. So my direct answer that I would say to employers, or to like what's the biggest misconceptions, is that you can put a template on us. Jake said this before. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person. I'm very different from Will, who's different from Jake, who's different from Connor, who's different from everyone. So the big misconception is that everyone is the same. And really the big thing that I would say there is just, if you know somebody is neurodivergent or neurodiverse in some way, ask them, how can you help them? How can you be a better advocate, a better supporter? How can you create an environment where they can succeed? I keep mentioning that environment, but it's really important to build an environment, build a space where neurodivergent employees, students, individuals can thrive and feel like they can be their genuine, authentic selves. And if you just have a cookie cutter model for every person, you'll never get everyone happy. But if you just sit down and talk to someone and just ask, hey, what can I do to help you? That goes a super duper long way. I'll let Connor tap in here if he has anything he wants to add.
Yeah, sure. Shay hit on most of it. I think in terms of the biggest misconception that we've had overall at a very high level is companies still think of, at least in the old school of thought, companies thought about neurodiversity hiring as a charity. And I think the conversation that we have so often with companies, that is really the biggest shift that's happening right now, in my opinion, is that mindset is changing very quickly to understanding that when we do understand the strengths of this very diverse community, when we do understand how to make sure that the environment that folks are in and that the role they're in is set up in the right way, then companies are very quick to understand that there's a huge business benefit and that this is not a charity. In fact, it's one of the biggest factors that's going to differentiate between the companies that thrive and the companies that maybe stagnate in the next decade or two. So one of the things that Mentra does every day is we're having this conversation with companies and we're showing them how valuable neurodiversity can be in their workplace, but also on an individual level. The solution that we're trying to build with the Mentra platform is a place where you as a neurodivergent individual can sign up and go through a process that really streamlines that type of conversation around what are your unique needs? What are your unique strengths? And how can you showcase that to employers? Because it is a challenging conversation to have without, any sort of training or understanding of this. And that's exactly where Mentra really streamlines that process, because just by going through the Mentra sign up process and creating a Mentra profile, that already gives a really good, grounding for any employer to understand you in particular. And it does vary so drastically across all of us. So that's why when we train employers on how to hire neurodivergents, there's no one playbook that works for everybody, but training them on how to interpret the Mentra profile and how to think about sort of that diversity is kind of how we approach it.
Awesome, thank you, Connor. When we first spoke about having this talk about a month ago, my thought was we're talking to 3 different audiences: people who maybe or are neurodivergent, people who are going to work with people who are neurodivergent, and then people like companies like Codeup, the companies that are part of that education. So, and I want to kind of hear from both the Mentra team and then maybe Deja and Will from being at boot camps. What advice would you give to educational institutions like Codeup, or even a 4-year degree institution, to give them to be able to say, this is, you at least start here. Like you said, there's no template, but first do this. Is it gather the information first? Is it bring in a professional? What advice would you give a company like Codeup to be able to give the best path possible for those who's diagnosed like that?
I would definitely say that they should have a team that can dedicate the time and resources to help those who are neurodivergent, because no, we're not all the same. But if you have someone that can feel comfortable going to that person and say, hey, this isn't working for me, I can't learn this way, or the hours aren't working for me, can there be something else? Can there be some kind of accommodation? And I know, like, a lot of boot camps, depending on what it is, you may not have that one-on-one like you want, because most times is virtual. So it's like, well, I can't work this way. Is there an alternative to working this way? So I think if most companies and boot camps or even colleges can have that team or just that person that can dedicate that time, I think it would be amazing.
Yeah, I resonate with that answer. And I appreciate the boot camp that I went to. We had it was through Discord, and there was a channel specifically set up for like mental health. It wasn't specifically like neurodiversity, but it kind of, yeah, they are connected. So just having a space for folks to go in and talk to each other about their struggles was really nice. It was really powerful. So yeah, whether it's like virtual or if it's something in person, you setting up like a like a meetup or something, just like building community for folks who I identify as neurodivergent is really powerful. Like community has been a common theme, I feel like, throughout this, and finding community, finding folks to talk to, feeling comfortable, talking to other people about your neurodiversity, or and figuring out like what works for other people. Because everyone, you've met one person who has autism, you've met one person who has autism, you've met one person who has ADHD, you've only met one person who has ADHD. Like everyone's journey is kind of different, but it's really nice to like find those communities where you can share your similarities, and build that community, find a safe space to talk to each other about the common struggles you might have, and educate each other.
I want to kind of take a little sidestep here. A question for our devs here. As y'all know, we have a lot of developers watching, and I think their ears perked up when you were talking about putting projects on GitHub and going in and building some code. What were the projects that y'all were doing between when you graduated and when you found that job? What was that project? Was it a React project? Was it a backend project? Tell us more about that.
I'll let Will go first. I think Will.
No, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
I feel like a lot of, and I will say to, all the devs watching, I feel like we are so focused on making a project because we're excited to just start coding, but we should have projects that have like meat to it, like something that really shows what we can do, instead of just like, I don't know, building like a JavaScript calculator and think like, this is it, this is gonna get me the job. You need something that has a lot of depth into it, So I built like different things like e-commerce websites or a booking app, or, you know, I would say the best thing they could do is build a project that relates to them. Like I have intentions on making a project that educates people about epilepsy, then building a project that could be helpful for other people. I feel like any site where you can book something is really just the best thing you can make. And just try not to do a lot of little projects that really don't mean anything. That doesn't really show that you know what you're doing. It just seemed like you watched a video on YouTube and you just copied it. Really have a very in-depth project, and that'd be.
Yeah, I totally agree with Deja on that. It's quality over quantity for sure. You know, it's nice to have some diversity on your portfolio, whether that's like your portfolio site or your actual like GitHub page. But overall, I think quality over quantity for sure. Trying to solve a problem is, you know, it's one really exciting thing about getting into tech is you can create these tools that can solve problems. So like really like doing a deep dive like through some introspection on like something, a problem that like you see like, you know, day to day, something that would improve your life. It's you know, kind of starting from there is a really good starting point. And you know, if you have a problem with something in your day to day, it's probable that like other folks probably also have that problem too. So yeah, creating something that would potentially solve some problems, whether it's something really small or something really big. But I created something where I really wanted to connect this this bootcamp community that I was a part of across multiple platforms. So I created kind of this like social networking hub where folks could log in using their Discord, and then connect to their GitHub and what was it? Just GitHub, Discord, and Twitter accounts, and then quickly follow each other. So like on a single click, they could follow their Twitter, their GitHub, and connect with them on Discord. Just like really streamline the process of like interconnecting this community, because I know that was the problem I saw was people who start out on like Twitter or GitHub or something, like they don't have a lot of followers, and it's can be kind of difficult to like start building that following. So yeah, interconnecting this community that's already there, like helping them connect across multiple platforms. I wanted to kind of solve that problem and start building out that network across multiple platforms. But yeah, something outside the box of like the YouTube template. I've talked to a lot of people who are in tech who like do interviews. I've talked to a lot of like recruiters, and something that's been pretty consistent across the board is like they see so many of those YouTube template projects, like they can sniff it out really quickly, really easily. And not to say like you can't get some value out of those projects, but like take that project then and then make it something unique, like, or like use an aspect of that YouTube project and bring it into something else and combine it with something else from some other template project then or something to create something more unique. And I know that's easier said than done, but yeah, like talking to your bootcamp cohort then and like talking to them about like frustrations that they see where technology could be a solution. Yeah, coming up with problems to solve with technology tools. It's cool. It's exciting. That's a great thing about being a developer is we can create these tools. And once you start doing that, then really opens up some doors, you know, just of like learning opportunities, but also potentially like job opportunities then too.
I'll chime in super briefly here, but one other thing I'll also add for engineers and developers, or even designers, or anybody in the tech space, is finding like civic hacking programs or like hack for good programs that exist. I know the Boston area has one, for instance, and those are great ways to work on projects that mean something, collaborate with people, get a chance to work with designers, product managers, and data scientists. Those are excellent ways of building a portfolio without having that be attached to an employer or a corporate job. I did that for a little bit myself, and I have nothing but good things to say about those sorts of programs.
I love it. Thanks for sharing that. That's the one thing we've seen is talent wins, code wins. Do something that's meaningful for you. That's what's going to get you up when it's been 2 weeks since you've gotten an interview, and you're going to want to go do that versus just going and building out another calculator application. We're coming up here on time, but Connor, we've spoken a lot about the topic. Obviously, that this is where Mentra was born. This is the type of people that you're here to help. Tell us more about the platform, and then we'll talk about how people can actually sign up to join.
Yeah, thanks so much. And it's been a wonderful conversation. For those of you who in the audience might be interested in learning more about Mentra, we're a team of neurodivergents. All of us have come on our own non-traditional journeys to being here, but we all share that same challenge and also the same strengths or various strengths. In terms of how Mentra works, we have a website. It's www.mentra.me. If you do /Codeup at the end, all lowercase Codeup, you'll be able to sign up in the Codeup cohort and get exclusive access to perks. When you do sign up to Mentra, it's actually about a 20 to 30 minute sign up process, and you'll be asked a number of questions, but it's one application. So you submit one application and that gets you in front of dozens of jobs. So the jobs actually come to you. And when we understand those 20 to 30 minutes, we're actually able to create you a digital profile that will showcase your neurodiversity, your neuro exceptional strengths, your skills. And it goes a lot deeper than a traditional resume, because it can also serve as sort of like a working with me document where a lot of the accommodations and environmental sensitivities can be showcased right on that Mentra profile to any prospective employers. And essentially from there, you will get a dashboard and opportunities will come to you. If you are flagged as a good fit, we have an algorithm that's constantly learning. But if you want to be more proactive, you can go on our jobs board once you have a profile set up on the dashboard, and you can express interest in certain jobs, and that will boost your visibility. We are constantly adding new employers. We have about 20 employers we're talking to right now that have not yet posted their first job that will be doing so in the coming months. So going through the process and signing up, even if you don't get a job with Mentra, you can get a profile and you can actually share that profile to any other employers that maybe you've already gotten hired with and you want to sort of advocate for how to best work with others, or maybe you want to actually add that profile into your job application to another employer. So we're super happy to help in any capacity. And we actually have a team member who will also meet with you when you do sign up and kind of walk you through the process of how you in particular can request the accommodations that you need and really showcase your strengths.
Perfect, Connor. Thank you so much. I've looked at the platform. You showed me some of the stuff they're working on. It is amazing. It's one of the best tools I've seen out there, period. They're really taking the time to make it as easy as possible, but also make it a platform where you're going to actually be successful versus just another place to kind of go to. So we are here at time. I cannot thank every single one of you for showing up here and sharing your stories. I know it's going to help out a whole lot. And for those students, those instructors, everybody at Codeup, will send the link over to if you want to go ahead and sign up. Again, thank you all so much. We look forward to continuing to work with you. And please, if we can ever do anything for y'all, just reach out to us.
Thanks everybody for joining. So great to have this awesome conversation with Christian, with Deja, Will, Jake, Connor, Angelica. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Later, folks.